Welcome to Slight Reliability, learning SRE one day at a time. I'm Stephen Townsend. Hello, welcome back to Slight Reliability. I'm Stephen Townsend, and this is the show where we learn about SRE and observability 1 week at a time. Today, I'm joined by guest Ivan Merrill from Fiberplane. Hello, Ivan.
Hello.
And we are going to be talking around the theme of implementing observability in real, complex, challenging organizations, which most of us work in. So that's the theme today. Ivan, do you want to give us a little bit of a background about who you are and your career?
Yeah, okay. So hello, I'm Ivan Merrill. I started in the tech industry in 2006, I think. Yep, around that time. I had a degree in computer science and got a job at HSBC, who are obviously one of the world's biggest financial institutions. I spent 10 years there doing various things early on, but then fairly quickly settled into kind of monitoring and observability and things, and kind of led some of their big monitoring deployments, and then moved on to Capital One, another fairly big financial institution, and spent 5 years with them, kind of doing a similar role at the beginning, and then moving into kind of team management and running the monitoring team for at Capital One UK. So lots of experience in kind of monitoring and observability, and I a year and a half ago moved across to Fiberplane, where we're making collaborative notebooks for SREs, integrating with monitoring tools and stuff like that. So I've moved from kind of gone to the other side of the vendor fence, I guess. So yeah, that's me.
Yeah, awesome. This not quite the same, but sort of similar recent experience for me, working for an insurance company and now moving to a sort of a dashboarding visualization product company. Yeah, it's a bit of a shift, isn't it?
Yeah.
I thought I'd open with a really dumb question. Why are organizations trying to uplift their observability? What is the outcome which an organization sees them achieving by improving their observability?
I was thinking about this, a while ago, and I think one of the things that, particularly in kind of larger companies, bigger companies, we're all kind of, with this SRE mindset, reliability is the number one feature, and even within, Fiberplane, I haven't been a long time, but already people know that that's something I like to say and something I firmly believe in. But once you kind of get to these really large companies, right, it's around risk for me and mitigating risk. And I think for observability, the driver for it is two types of risk. There can be certainly in the financial industry, you can get fines, right? If you are not, I've been involved in incidents where, people didn't have access to their money, which is a really bad thing. They weren't about to buy their shopping. Regulators don't like that, right? Turns out. So they can impose fines on you. That is a bad thing, right? But the bigger one is the reputational risk. No one wants to see their company on the front of a newspaper headline, or kind of on a website, Hacker News or something like that, whereby there is a big outage with their product and their company, and that is a risk, right? And that's one that takes a lot longer to recover from. So the higher, I guess, up the organization, the more removed they are from the technology or whatever, I find that the driver less becomes the thing of, well, we don't want our thing to break, or getting involved in the technology or anything else like that. It's a risk conversation, right? So yeah, I think that is probably the number one driver.
So in terms of that reputational risk, it's a very familiar language to me coming from performance testing and engineering. We would use the exact same language to say, what is the risk to your business, But I guess observability provides you the ability to potentially see issues before they impact your customers, that kind of thing, and respond faster.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, I probably didn't give the complete answer there. So yeah, so the sales piece to the kind of the business case, I guess, is written around risk, right? And it's a mitigating factor, right? And when we talk about risks, we look at mitigations. Well, we can mitigate the risk of severe reputational risk by reducing our downtime, making ourselves more available, which is knowing about issues before our customers call in. You know, it's knowing that we have an issue if they do call in, and being able to say, actually, we're aware of this, we've got people on it, being able to send out, timely communications and all those things from a kind of more business point of view. But yeah, being more reliable, being more available, and if you're not, if you are having problems, understanding what's going on and being able to fix them quicker inherently is a great way to mitigate the risk of customers being unhappy because they can't access their money, you getting fines, appearing on front pages of newspapers, all those things. So yeah, it's very much a case of mitigating the risk by having a better understanding of your service, of the state of it all, and therefore enabling reliability.
Just thinking as you were speaking, we talk a lot in sort of SRE about reliability and availability. I think part of reliability is sort of the performance of our services, how responsive they are, maybe how scalable they are. Was that something that was important or valued in the organizations you've worked in before, or was it mostly about availability?
Yes, is a simple answer. Yes, performance and everything was important. I think there is obviously scales in terms of what's important. I've seen it both ways actually. I've come across sometimes whereby people have had maybe a decisioning engine that's so quick that customers didn't trust it, and we actually had to add in a kind of a fake delay to make people feel like it was doing something in the background, which is I find really kind of interesting in this world of going everything's really we want everything as fast as possible. But yes, it is an important aspect, and everything else to that. I think it's one that there's the Dixon's hierarchy of reliability. This kind of pyramid with kind of monitoring at the bottom, right, where we talk about things that we can do that we can care about more as we have some of the basics kind of down, right? So I think once you move beyond availability, once you move beyond kind of reliability, then you can start attacking performance more. But yeah, it is something that I think, particularly in bigger organizations that do have the ability to expend engineering time and effort on performance, it's definitely something that I've kind of come across. So.
Just thinking about your experiences at HSBC and Capital One, what sort of observability solutions did you roll out? I'm sort of curious about the details of what you implemented. Like, for example, did you build bespoke sort of solutions for teams, or for individual teams that I'm going to build this thing for you so it works for you, or build a platform which lots of teams can then build on or use?
Yeah. So at those scales, you can't build individually for each team unless there is obviously some particularly high value thing. Say you do have kind of the HSBC world, and many other banks, they have particularly high end trading systems that are dealing with ridiculous sums of money. They will have something very bespoke for them because they're massively high value, and also because latency is a really important thing for them, so they can't do normal things. So they do have their own tooling. But most of the time, in my experience, what we've been building is kind of platforms and a nice self-service journey to enable teams to kind of get on boarded with a good level of things in the first place, with the least amount of friction to get there, right? It's people kind of talk about, there are various kind of phrases that kind of come out here, kind of lowering the barrier of entry, and people talk about democratizing the data in terms of kind of making it more available to everyone, and they're all the kind of things that you're going through, right? This kind of platform that exists that you've built. So quite often that's been kind of in the enterprise world, kind of a COTS product, right? An off-the-shelf product that you have bought, that you have implemented. So I started off with kind of, it was infrastructure monitoring was the thing when I started, and then I went through APM, and then we kind of now into the kind of observability world. These are all kind of different levels of tooling, but historically, generally an off-the-shelf product, buy it, implement it, but then the trick is in the way that you make it available to people, the way you allow people to consume it. That's where the real magic happens to me, because that's you want people to think, firstly, that they actually want to use your product because they see value in it, and secondly, that the journey to get there isn't scary enough that they're going to go off and look for their own thing, or kind of build their own thing, or just not do it altogether because it's too much effort, right? So yeah. Generally, as I said, a bought product trying to make as available as possible for the wider group, with some kind of bespoke things or a greater level of engagement, quite often with high value services.
Yeah, I guess from my own experience, the off the shelf or cloud products that we've bought were, there was obviously a gap in terms of sharing the knowledge of how to use them effectively, but also needing to customize those tools a little bit for each team, to get the right level of instrumentation or configuration so that it actually picks up the things that they need to see. And that was often a gap that I saw. So that, an enterprise tool would be purchased, huge money invested, and very not customized in a way which is actually useful. You're probably getting 2 or 3% value out of this tool because of the lack of that extra, the difficult step at the end. Do you seen that at all?
Yeah. I'm kind of yes. I think there is this. I've seen it time and time again in kind of incidents and things, right? And it's you see one or two people that kind of seem to kind of rise to the top, and always see in terms of the incidents, they seem to be the people that everyone kind of wants on their incident, right? And because they seem to know what's going on, incidents happen, get fixed more quickly, things seem to move along. And in general, I find that that's because that person has kind of one of two things, and ideally both, which is a great understanding of the service that they've, if you're trying that it's broken or got an issue, a great mental model and knows how the bits piece together, but then a really good knowledge of the data that is available for it, and a really good way of interrogating that and everything else like that. So that person is able to generate kind of hypotheses and quickly discard them, or disprove them as they're going through this incident, and so things are moving forward, right? I'd love to say that kind of I've had complete success, and every engineer I've ever spoken to has come out singing a wonderful observability hymn sheet, but that's just not the case, right? And quite often people aren't being incentivized for that to be the case as well. And so you're looking to firstly find someone who has some interest in a team, and kind of a little bit of latching onto them, and kind of hoping that they come into it. You're talking to product managers sometimes, kind of trying to make it really important. Training is a really hard thing. And in my old team at Capital One, one of the things that we used to do is I did a little presentation to every new engineer that joined the company, as part of our kind of department's commitment to the onboarding of new engineers, to say hello. Like we had this imaginary lollipops website, and we talked about reliability being its number one feature, and that was kind of my kind of intro into the world of observability. But also we spent a lot of time on training people and providing kind of a community, as much as anything. People knew they could ask questions in our Slack channels and get responses and things like that. But we also ran monthly 101 sessions for all of our monitoring tools. I think we had kind of 4 or 5. So, it was quite a commitment to do that, but it's obviously worthwhile. You want these teams to be as self-service as possible. You want them to be able to kind of get there by themselves. Again, as I said, I'd love to have been given a really kind of white glove service, to every single service that came along, right? And we really, but we were a team of 7 or 8 people, right? And against, I think it was like 500, 600 engineers at one point in Capital One, right? So we're not going to be able to go around to every single one and help them. So we have to focus on making it as easy as possible, providing the education, good documentation as well, but just doing everything we can to provide that the best chance of success with no involvement with us, backed up by friendly service and a lovely smile if they do have any problems, right? It's about this whole thing is kind of, it's a trust thing, right? You want these people to feel like you've done a good job, you've tried to do as much as possible to help them, so that they think it's worth their while, that they'll come back to you, they'll ask a question if they have some problems, right?
I think that is the most proactive that I've ever heard of an organization being around observability. The fact that every new engineer gets an introduction or a talk about it, fantastic. And I like the idea of finding those observability champions throughout the org who can sort of carry carry the torch. Yeah.
Yeah, we had great success doing things like early adopters programs, right? So where we're bringing in a new tool, we get together a group that of people that we generally know have had, kind of experience with tools before, are, great champions of monitoring and observability tools themselves, generally because they've been bitten in the past, right? And bringing together these people and using them as our early adopters for every new tool to say like, right, we're putting in this tool because it solves all of these problems over here, which we know you're facing. We'd love to help you. We just need a bit of, help and support and feedback on how we're doing and how we can make this more easy for you. And then building out that kind of those people that are, because they're quite invested, they're getting quite a lot out of the tool and things, and then kind of starting that kind of that initial momentum with people who are kind of fully involved and motivated to do it is a really big thing, right?
A little bit of change of tack with this next question. In terms of observability or telemetry signal types, I've had a previous guest, Jose Velez, come in, and we were talking about traceability. It's tracing. Distributed tracing is sort of the key element of sort of modern observability, dealing with the distributed nature of systems and that. But he was saying from his experience, about 1% of his customers have actually implemented it. So my question for you is, were you involved in implementing distributed tracing? And if so, what were the challenges with that?
So yes, very much involved in tracing. So I've watched this all kind of grow, really. So I was working with a company in 2008, a now defunct company from called Optir, and they were one of the first that I ever saw to actually provide a product for tracing. So, and they started with something a completely other thing with their thing, where they went to banks and said, we'd really like to help you prioritize your transactions to make the ones that have like really, really high value be prioritized ahead of ones that have less value. And then when they tried to do that, they realized, I think, that they couldn't do that because they had no idea of the transactions that were going through any system. So then they actually did this. So I was working on this distributed tracing kind of thing where we very similar to what people understand it to be. So now you install this agent, because we were using Java, the financial world, a lot of Java going on. Install an agent, it integrated with the JVM, it did all the auto instrumentation, have a trace ID. I would follow transactions from kind of again a general basic 3-tiered web application, right? That kind of our web server, our our application server, and then rather than maybe a database it might have, but MQ to mainframe more than likely in a bank or something. So I was doing that very early on, and the biggest challenge, it sounds ridiculous to me, and I was it used to make me so angry, was just getting people to kind of care, really, or even understand like the capabilities of this kind of this thing was. I had incidents kind of early on where I'd be saying, it's over there, I can see the issue is over there, like that particular one particular application server, or everything that's going on a particular MQ queue, or whatever else, that it's like screaming into the wind, because everyone was kind of so caught up in their own existing investigations with their own previous things of data that they didn't kind of know that there was this thing going on that could give them all of this data. And then even if we did get someone to do that, it would take time, because we then need to find someone who had the knowledge of the system and could understand what I was seeing and translate it to what they were seeing. Because I've always generally worked in kind of central teams. So if I'm being brought along to an incident, it's because essentially they've got something, they don't really know what to do with the monitoring tools, so they'd like some monitoring tool expertise. So I didn't know the service, I just knew the tool and the types of data, right? So yeah, it's a real kind of amazing power if you've got it right. But even if I had great data, not knowing the service enough, I needed someone else to kind of take it away, and then that person wouldn't know about me having this data. Or
yeah, you've given me a Vietnam War flashbacks of performance engineering. We are not necessarily distributed tracing tools, but getting data from every component and showing here's the problem, but still not having confidence myself, because I don't know the technology necessarily or the services, and then trying to convince people that this is where the problem is. But like you said, everyone's doing their own analysis using maybe traditional tools or the ways that have worked for the last 10 years. That's interesting. So even when you implement distributed tracing, it's not over yet. You still have to get people to trust or understand what they're seeing and the value of it.
Yeah, I think honestly, I think that's the same with any monitoring tool. I don't think that's just tracing, right? You can have 6 months of a really good kind of implementation going ahead and whatever else like that, and then an incident happens and people feel like maybe it didn't alert when it should have, or it's been alerting too much when it didn't, or the dashboard showed them that and it was that, and then it only takes these things where kind of one thing can lose an awful lot of trust in that's quickly built up, right? I think that's the kind of constant fight really, is this kind of thing of making sure that we're building up this trust. We're kind of really working hard to get it, because maybe it is your service is doing something that they don't expect, and that the data doesn't match with their model, or all these things are just ways that create mistrust in these tools, right? So yeah, even when you've got it, even when you are there screaming, I know what the problem is, everyone, sometimes it's still not enough.
I'm going to ask a very unslight reliability question. Could you just list off some of the different tools of sort of observability and monitoring tools that you've used over the years?
PagerDuty, CloudWatch, Datadog, New Relic, AppDynamics, SolarWinds, BMC Patrol, that was a good one. HP BAC, HP Rum, AppDynamics. Did I say that? That was probably the biggest one that I had most amount of time with. But yeah, so a fair few. I think I've missed a couple. I've had dealings with kind of other niche tools here and there, things that I use particularly in, as I said, like high-end, high frequency trading platforms or something like that. I've had deals with a few other logging tools. I haven't mentioned logging, so Logs.io, Splunk, CloudWatch Logs, the Elastic, and obviously Grafana, Kibana, all of those.
Yeah, I'm normally not that interested in tools generally, but it's just interesting to know what people are using out in the industry and how that changes over time. And yeah,
I'm now spending a lot more time around the open source tools, right? Fiberplane, we're releasing some of our software open source, and we're big believers in open source. So we work very closely with Prometheus as a tool and everything else of that. So it's actually been a slight kind of, I guess, change for me, but it's something that I've really quite enjoyed, getting a little bit more in the kind of, not in the weeds of the tools, I guess, but it's been a nice little change of pace. But there are so many tools out there now. Probably a new monitoring tool for every day of the week these days. But there you go. And it's still such a problem, right? I mean, this is the bizarre, that the market is so big and so many tools, but we're still talking about it, and we're still facing a lot of problems that companies have.
I have noticed, since I've been spending a lot of time with Prometheus recently, compared to being with the enterprise tools, it's quite almost opinionated, and you do have to sort of get in the weeds, and you feel like you're almost developing, as opposed to using a tool and having a nice interface and clear, understandable.
It's actually something that we've come across at Fiberplane, whereby we are looking to kind of get people involved in our tooling, and getting kind of maybe Prometheus data into a notebook and start analyzing it against their logs and things. But actually, people are struggling with Prometheus in the first place, right? Have they instrumented their code? Do they actually know how to query their data? So we've actually recently released a whole new open source package called Autometrics. So Rust and TypeScript and Python, I think, now have all been released. But it's essentially that. It's like, just don't do the least amount of things to get your code instrumented with good, at least good set of metrics, or a base set of metrics that are good enough for most people, and queries, and and everything else of that, right through to kind of automatically building the Prometheus queries through. Because, as you say, it's a very powerful tool, and it can do a lot of things, but you do feel like you need a kind of Prometheus expert to get the most amount of value from it, right?
Even just trying to understand how histograms and summaries work, and making sense of that mathematically in terms of, I want an accurate percentile. Oh my goodness, it's not the easiest thing to get your head around.
No, it isn't.
Before, I do want to ask you a bit more about sort of getting sort of engagement with engineers and teams. But before I do that, I did want to ask you about, in organizations, have you been involved in setting sort of standards or guidelines which you're hoping that teams will follow? And if so, how do you do that?
With a lot of trial and error, a lot of patience. It's hard. I used to kind of be a lot more maybe utopian, but I was also, as a result, probably spending a lot more of my time a lot more angry because people weren't following the standards or anything else like that, right? So I used to have this idea that we could, create some standards and everyone would follow them, and it would be great. They all got this thing. We'd already decided it. We'd used our expertise to say these are the good things to monitor. You all maybe have to have these. We'll definitely give them to you, or even in the worst cases, have a control gate on the kind of the path to live, right? You cannot go live because you don't have these specific metrics which we've defined as good. Yeah, it doesn't work. The more authoritative, I guess, I've tried to be, organizations have tried to be, the more resistance I found within the organization to following those, right? It's there's a lot of talk now, as you see, and I really agree with, around kind of the golden path, the happy path, right? And it's something that, again, with the automation thing, something that we've been talking about a lot is, you cannot put out a set of guidelines or something that will fit for everyone. You just can't do it, right? What you can say is, you can say, hey everyone, we've done a lot of great engineering work to provide you with this really, really nice thing here that will probably work for you, right? We've made it as easy to use. We will give you all the assistance. There's all the documentation here. There's all the guidelines, everything. This is really designed to make it easy for you to use. Go use it, right? But I can't force someone to do it. I can't force someone to generate a metric. You know, these are the things. And I just said, when I was younger, I used to get really angry about this, and why haven't they done this? Why haven't they got these things? And now it's just, yeah, I'm a bit more.
I think, the phrase invite over inflict comes to mind from Sooner Safer Happier, one of my favorite books.
That's a nice way of describing it. No, I say I've seen it really, really backfire in some cases, whereby like people have put in kind of big, big, big organization level kind of standards and say everyone must do this, and then the worst thing about it is that no one understands the value of it. There is no context to why they're doing it. People are often putting in metrics that they don't care about and don't understand. So there's no actual improvement in kind of the monitoring, the observability, because people have done this thing because they've been told to do this thing, and the education isn't there, so they don't understand it. Which makes them then kind of resent those tools, resent that kind of whole thing. And so they've got the monitoring, but all it's doing is kind of essentially just claiming CPU for no good value. And they're still kind of, when something breaks, they're still kind of there going, we know we've got monitoring. Where is our monitoring? Who helps us with this? Because they don't even know what they got. So yeah, I would much rather, probably, if I had to choose one end of the spectrum or the other, I would probably much rather provide no guidance and say, hey everyone, as long as you've got it, and I'm happy, rather than the kind of all on the other side, being very prescribed.
That's my inclination too. I think that if a team has sort of ownership and autonomy and actually value whatever they're doing in the monitoring space, I think that's more valuable than sort of mandating you will use this thing, but them just literally disengaging it. Oh, it's just a box to tick. I think that's a worse outcome. But there's a lot of, and when I bring this up, in the community, there's a reasonable amount of pushback saying, but then you get tool sprawl and everyone's doing their own thing. So I think there's definitely a balance.
If you have tool sprawl, then my old answer was like, but we must tell them they must use our tools. But now my kind of more enlightened, I'd like to think, approach on it is kind of like, okay, why aren't they using our tool? What do we need to do with our tool to make it so much easier and so much better for them to use, right? If we are the team that's providing this tool as essentially as a service to the rest of the organization, and they've chosen to go for something else, did they just not know about us? Did it not fit their technical requirements? Was it too much effort? What can we do to kind of change their minds? And I think that's a better way to be going about it, and a better way to look at it, as an opportunity to learn, to improve, and make your tooling better, rather than denying someone the tooling that they feel they need.
I think that's a great answer. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Ask the question, why don't they want to use this? I guess so. The last question I wanted to ask around is, over your years, what kinds of challenges have you faced, like trying to practically implement useful, helpful observability in organizations?
There are so many challenges, right? I think the first one is getting people to care, right? And that is sadly the thing. I mean, observability is now this kind of cool thing, and like I'm seeing more and more that at conferences it's there and everything, and I could sit here and kind of get angry and, oh, where were they in 2008 when I was doing, you know what I mean? Like, but actually, it's great that everyone's got it as their buzzword and everyone's kind of interested in it and everything else like that. But good intentions don't achieve anything, right? The people are talking about it, but when it comes down to the choice between, do we want to implement this new feature or go back and instrument our code base, it's going to be the new feature that wins, right? And that is an organizational culture that's not just that product manager or just that engineering team or anything else like that goes all the way up the business, right? And that's generally the life of people in, I guess, in operations who historical operations have seen this quite a lot, right? It's hard to get the time to talk about these things at the top level. It becomes easier when there's a big incident, right? That is a great time to kind of say, oh, if you'd have implemented that tool and looked that way and everything else of that, it's not a very nice way. I'd probably go in quite softly rather than told you so. It's the biggest challenge is getting people to care. And when you get an incident and you get that person that knows about that thing, that knows about that service, that knows about that monitoring tool, you're going to find you have a much, much better experience generally, right? That's my experience, and what happens then is that organizations, they start to kind of know who in that area of the business is really good at getting resolving incidents. And then you kind of find these people, it's like that kind of thing of like, oh, you wrote some SQL once, so you're now our DBA. It's like, oh, well, you resolved that incident once now, so you're now like our person on call. Or do you know what I mean? That kind of thing. And these people that are often taking this mantle are the people that they're taking it because they've been burnt in the past, right? They've had a bad experience, so they're there in all of their kind of their engineering meetings and stuff, saying, we need to get some monitoring in our thing. We need to instrument our code. We need some good logging. Why don't we have structured logs? Why are we doing this? And they're having that fight within their team. I'm having that kind of like that fight, more organizationally, and it's hard. And the fact is that as a company, if we come back to our first conversation, right? I mentioned, why are people doing this, or why are large organizations doing this? They're doing this to mitigate risk, right? So unless you can kind of say to people, this risk is like really, 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 really high, and the mitigation is really, really, really easy, that kind of thing, is almost fundamentally, to me, thinking about it, that's probably the game that I'm spending most of my time doing in these organizations, right? Is talking about that risk versus mitigation and trying to make the mitigation a lot easier, and trying to really kind of educate people about the risks and about the fact that, as we are breaking up our services and moving to microservices, as we are moving into the cloud, as we are all of these things have been projects that have individually kicked off the purchase of new monitoring tools that I've seen, right? Hey, Ivan, we're moving to the cloud, and we need some new kind of cloud monitoring tools. Or hey, we're now going to be we need to do some tracing because we've got our microservices no longer one big monolith, right? And what's happening there is the risk is getting greater, right? And so we need to bring that mitigation in. So fundamentally, yeah, having a conversation with people about risk versus mitigation, and actually getting them to believe me is probably the hardest thing. And it's I can tell you for sure that in 10-15 years time there will be some observability person somewhere having a conversation with a product manager about why they really 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 should be thinking about SLOs when they're kind of building their product, and that person will be saying that's great, but we're actually going to build this new feature. It's the way of the world, right?
I keep thinking, it's an easy sell to talk about observability with people who've been burned or organizations who've been burned, but everyone else, it's a much tougher sell, because it's like until you see it with your own eyes, it's like how conspiracy theorists are, right? Because if they can't see it in front of their face, it's not real,
Yeah, I can't go around and instrument it on every service. I can provide automation, I can do everything, I can provide a scaled up model that makes it as easy as possible for people to do it, right? But as much as I can try and make it sound super lovely and cool and, put some flashy lights on it and do a little dance, like, people are going to want to actually go and write some interesting code more often than not, right? And that's the way of it. I used to tell everyone that, like, I'm the monitoring person. I'm here to make sure that, when your code breaks and everything isn't working and everything else like that, we can make sure we fix it and stuff like that. And I really entirely changed around my perspective and said, I'm here to tell everyone how brilliant your code is, right? Because we're all working, SLOs, right? They're generally like 4 nines. That's a really small amount of time in a year that you are allowed to be down to satisfy your SLO, right? So I'm not here to tell everyone, make sure that when your stuff's broken. I'm here to tell everyone what a great job you do, right? How reliable your code is, how performant it is, how many times it's getting used, or something like that, because that is a much easier sell to people, right? than to say, your stuff breaks, but don't worry, I'm here to help. It's human. These are all human things.
No, it's really refreshing. It's a maturity thing, I think, as well, as individuals, with your, almost consulting or enabling or advising, to find the right language or approach which people can actually take on board and go, okay, I can listen to that, as opposed to, hey, your code sucks, and I'm gonna fix it.
I had a very abrupt conversation with someone when so I was doing this early 20, 23, 24 or something, and I was speaking to developers, and it's like, like, your code breaks, and when it does break, we're here to help you and stuff like that. And someone quite abruptly was like, my code's great, why are you telling me my code's bad? No, I'm not trying to tell you your code's bad. I'm sure your code is very lovely. Then why are you here telling me my code is breaking? I'm not. It's a very difficult conversation, but one that I really learned from, that really kind of impacted me. It's like, why am I going around and telling everyone your code breaks? Like, it's not a nice sale. I'm making this whole sales piece, right, harder for myself by actually choosing to focus on the negative rather than the positive.
Thank you once again, Ivan, for coming on the show. It was great to hear your experiences implementing observability in the real world. It's not easy, and it's really interesting to hear the different experiences that people have had and how they've negotiated different challenges. So, thanks once again. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in once again, and I'll see you all next week.